Right. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for coming to this Zoom. And I hope you'll find it interesting, the sort of background and how I approached building Bath Green Park, because it's obviously quite an extensive railway, and it's principally something that I've produced on my own with help from others. The background to the Somerset and Dorset, well, my interest in the Somerset and Dorset goes back to childhood. Although we lived in Yorkshire, grandparents in Bournemouth, I was aware of the Somerset and Dorset from the very early days. So I was lucky enough to actually see the Somerset and Dorset in action in its last 2 or 3 years, and managed to visit a number of the stations on the line, including Bath Green Park itself. So it has been a lifelong passion, if you like. And as I was just saying to Tony and Richard, always 7mm. I've always been interested in the 7mm scale, even though back in the 60s, when I, like everybody else, had a model railway, 7mm was obviously a little bit obscure in those days, but fortunately by the 70s was beginning to regain momentum. And so there was never any question, always going to be 7mm. And I started with building Temple Combe back in the back of my garage and off down the garden. And but it was always, I always knew I was going to build Bath Green Park. It was always going to be my lifelong ambition to do this. The opportunity came 20 odd years ago when we built our present house. And I made sure that 2 of the bedrooms weren't built as bedrooms, but as one big room. So Bath Green Park is in a room 45 feet by 15 feet. So very fortunate, very fortunate. Tony, do you want to move to the first of the pictures, please?
Indeed. Well,
yeah. So there's the overall plan. It's very much diagrammatical. My interest is in recreating, running the trains that ran in the 50s and 60s and running the timetable. I mean, we're very fortunate. The Somerset and Dorset has a huge support from the media. And so an awful lot of information is available about the railway. And what I can't find from books and YouTube, I'm very lucky that I know Mike Arlett, and he's been so helpful over the years in just getting more detail. And if he doesn't know, he gets on to people who did work on the Somerset and Dorset, and invariably the answer comes back. And that's proved extremely useful in getting the detail right in running.
45 foot by 15. So it's roughly 5 meters.
can you all mute yourselves, please? Thank you very much.
So it's all about the detail, running the correct stock to timetable. And if you've watched any of my videos, you pick up on that straight away, that I'm running the real timetable, be it the weekday or the summer Saturday timetable. That's been paramount. Why, when I was laying out the railway, I wanted it to be as accurate a portrayal of Bath Green Park as I could make it. And inevitably, there's areas which have to be reduced in size. But the overall concept, I think, is a pretty good portrayal of what was there. And many of the pictures that you'll see, I like to get the camera down to track level. I like to try and portray the railway as I remember seeing them, back in the 60s. And so not so many high shots looking down, it's track level looking almost up at the locomotives and trains. And so that's very much the theory behind what I've been trying to create. So back in 2000, we moved into the house. Within 3 or 4 years, I'd started to build. Again, for me, the way the railway was set up was important. So open top framework. The railway runs through the countryside, so it doesn't sit on top of it. It runs through it, and so to me, it was really important that the railway should sit on embankments, going through cuttings, and again, it's that visual thing about trying to create as accurate a portrayal of the railway system as I could. Like a lot of people, I spent probably 6 months or more scribbling down track plans, getting ever more flamboyant, the bin was filling with rejected track plans. Bath Green Park was always there. That was always going to be the key, but it was the rest of it that took quite a long time to settle on the track layout. Principal thing is, because I'd be running the railway predominantly on my own, the fact that the Somerset and Dorset from Bath Junction is single track out to Midford posed no problems. It meant that it's easier to run the railway because of those kind of restrictions. So it's not like a double track main line with trains charging up and down, and it's often only one in a room, and a railway so large, it's often one train running at a time because of that single track of the Somerset and Dorset. But at the same time, I can also be shunting the yards, moving locomotives on shed, and then there's always the fiddle yard that needs to be attended to. Tony, do you want to drop to the second picture, please? So this and the following picture show the railway in its entirety. So that's looking one way out from Bath. Bath Green Park is lower left, out of shot. You've got the top of the Somerset and Dorset engine shed, the turntable, behind which is the Midland shed. On the left is the Midland yard, and then following the main line across the room to the right-hand side, the Somerset and Dorset yard and Bath Junction are there. Probably not that easy to see in the picture, but we'll see these in detail later on. But from Bath Junction, the Somerset and Dorset turns left, goes up Devonshire Bank into Devonshire Tunnel, which is that hillside on the left-hand side. Yep, thank you. And then comes out into Lincoln Vale, which is coming up the left-hand side. And then passes into Combe Down Tunnel, which actually runs behind the back scene on the left. And so goes round behind me, we'll see it in a moment, through Midford Station, over Midford Viaduct, and then comes out on the right-hand side. And those are the Ruthlington Colliery sidings. And then you can see the tunnel mouth where it disappears off on the far right-hand side, and heads down to the Fiddle Yards, which is, absolutely, that's it. That's exactly where it comes out. And the Fiddle Yards, you can see 3 sidings of coaches there on the left. Underneath Lincoln Vale are 2 more sidings. And then you've got that, and they're all double-ended. So there's 6 lines there, which then reconnect underneath the Midland Bridge Yard, and then fan out into another 7 or 8 single-ended sidings. So the Fiddle Yard's in, almost 3 parts. If you look to the far end, there's another 6 sidings there. that make up that end, that end of the fiddle yard. They're all new. I put those in about 18 months ago. With the ever increasing timetable that I was able to operate, I needed more storage. So I've got, I think, something like 18 sidings in the combined fiddle yards, and storage for about 25 locos. And as there are always, or as my understanding of the timetable has increased over the years, so that extra space was needed. Let's go to the next picture, Tony.
Is that coming up?
Yeah.
Oh, yes, sorry, yes, yeah. So this is looking in towards Bath Green Park. The station building you can see is top right. For those that didn't know Green Park, it had 2 platforms and 2 central storage rows. Right, are we all clear?
Yeah, Jules, I've just muted you because there's a lot of background information going on there.
Yeah, right, okay. Am I clear to carry on?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Lovely, okay. So, Bath Green Park train shed, which I'll talk about in a few minutes' time. So coming forward from there, on the left, you've got the Midland 2-road shed. No.
Oh.
Further back, literally just to the right. There, that's it. So that's the old stone Midland shed, and that was first on the scene. Again, for those that don't know, the Midland Railway were the first ones into Bath, and later joined by the Somerset and Dorset. So going to the left of there, Tony, the next building, that's the coaling stage, water tower, and then to the left of that, you've got the 4-road S&D shed, which it was timber construction. How it never burnt down, I don't know, but it lasted right through to closure. Then on the right-hand side, right over on the right-hand side, that's the Midland Bridge goods yard. So the Somerset and Dorset had 2 goods yards. Sorry, Bath Green Park had 2 goods yards, Midland yard and the Somerset and Dorset yard. And I'll explain why there are 2 yards and how the structure of the trains coming in and out of Bath. Part of my fascination is the research that's gone into understanding how the trains were running and why, for that matter. So just back to the picture again. So on the right on the left-hand side, that's and up, that's Rislington goods, Rislington colliery exchange sidings. And then right at the top, you can just make out Midford Viaduct and Midford Station. And we'll look at these in more detail. Just down to bottom right, Tony, for a moment. So this is part of the fiddle yard. So those are 3 double-ended sidings you can see there. The track on the left of them, the 4th track, is actually, I call it the main line that runs through to the 2nd fiddle yard, which is beyond Bath Green Park. Well, it's actually underneath Bath Green Park Station. Okay, next picture, please. Yep, there we go. So there you go, a picture I took in 1966, just as the S&D was closing. And I did a day trip out from my grandparents in Bournemouth, did Westbury Shed, Bath Green Park, and Bristol Borough Road. And, I was only 13 going on 14, but was allowed to wander all over the country on my own or with pals. I don't know whether that would be approved of these days by parents, but There we go. I'm sure many of us have similar stories to tell. Right, okay, next picture, Tony, please. Right, Bath Green Park train shed. This was always going to be a difficult one to build. And it was actually after the first Guild virtual show. And there was some really interesting sessions on 3D printing. And so I started talking to people, and I linked up with Aaron Sharma, a Guild member, and lives in Bath by coincidence. Really, really helpful. Anyway, he produced a 3D copy of the pillar. He even went to Bath Green Park to measure the pillars for me. So, so he produced that 3D printed, and then I got a mold made up, and then however many 35 or 40 pillars cast. And that really was the key to getting on and producing the Green Park train shed. The bowstring girders are all MDF laser cut, as are if you look to you can see them better on the left in the roof, those longitudinal girders. I copied them from the original. Again, got them 3D printed, and from that started to construct. And so this was my COVID lockdown project at the beginning of last year, 2021. So it took 4 months to build, but very worthwhile. I mean, it makes the railway, to be honest, and features obviously extensively in the videos that I do. Out of interest, the Class 4 76053 is a Temple Combe loco coming in on a 3-coach Maunsell set on a Temple Combe Bath local. That's platform 2 for those that didn't know. Oh, and on the right, the building there on the right is the bonded store. So high value goods would be offloaded in there. I think that's probably as much as I can say about it. Next picture then, Tony. Okay, the far end of platform 2. I've made it extend. It doesn't necessarily show in the pictures, thank goodness. But I made extensive use of photocopying and enlarging pictures from books. Mm-hmm. So the end wall you see there is actually a picture taken out of a book and enlarged.
Very good. Andrew, just a quick question here. How do you deal with coupling and uncoupling items underneath the canopy?
You're right. So you can't see it there, but actually the roof, there's a gap of about 12 inches in the roof. So I can stick my hand in at the precise point where I'm going to be uncoupling. The intention is actually to carry on and build an infill section of roof that then just hinges back, but no, I haven't got around to that one yet.
Thank you.
And the pictures that you see, the videos that I avoid showing things like that. Yeah, just trying to recreate. If you stood on platform 2 in Bath Green Park back in 1960, that's exactly what you would have seen. And yeah, which pleases me. 53802, worth a mention. This is my latest 7F. So I have 5 of them. Built for me by Bob Joy, a very good friend, a brilliant engineer and modeler. And as with my little group of half dozen Bath Green Park friends, if you like, he comes along most Wednesday afternoons, and we do a bit of work, we run a few trains and chat a lot. But 53822 is worth a mention because it's battery operated and radio controlled. And if you've watched the videos, you'll have seen and heard it. It's about the best steam engine sound reproduction that I've heard anywhere. The electronic gubbins is by Steve at Fossworks. And yeah, expensive, but very, very good. Okay, next one, please, Tony.
Ian Allen's put on, you need it weathering.
Oh yes, yeah, that's the next job to do. Right, looking from platform 2 across to platform 1. It just shows the general layout of again. If you were standing on the platform back in 1960, that's exactly what you'd have seen, and it's as accurate as I can get it. Yeah, we're all subject to a lot of compression, and I've always joked that my room may be 45 foot long, but I could have done with another 10 feet. And I'm sure I'm not alone in thinking that. Okay, next one, please, Tony. So we're on platform 1, looking out. Again, this is, if you look at some of Ivo Peter's books.
Just trying, but I can't.
Okay, fair enough.
So,
Are we okay? So
I think somebody's unmuted themselves accidentally. Can everybody make sure that they have muted themselves by pressing the microphone until it becomes red? Thank you very much.
Okay, so standing on platform 1, looking out over the River Avon. Again, this is exactly what you'd have seen. The stone-built Midland shed on the right, with the Somerset and Dorset timber shed further out on the right and at a lower level. The back end of Midland Bridge Yard on the left. And worth a mention, the little ground frame shed that you can see between the two 4Fs. Bath Green Park carriage ground frame, I think it was called. And it operated the crossover underneath the left-hand 4F and the single slip that's there, the siding leading into the bonded store. And so it only had, I think, 3 or 4 levers, and it could only be operated by release from Bath signal box, which you can see in the background there. If you look at the signalling diagram, it's really interesting. The crossover in front that you can see in front was worked similarly by an open ground frame at the end of the platform. And again, it was only released by Bath signal box. Okay, next one, please, Tony. So we've moved out a little bit. This is looking back towards the engine sheds. You can just about make the station train shed just above the Midland shed. That's interesting. The picture's got compressed slightly.
Apologies for that. That'll be my fault entirely.
That's okay. So there, if one could have elevated oneself to that height when the railway was running, that's the view you'd have got. The 4-road S&D shed, the coaling stage, Midland shed with the turntable in front. The 9F is just coming off the 2 roads that link back onto the turntable. And to the right of the 9F, 2 sidings. On many track plans, they're marked up as gasworks sidings. Not quite sure why. It was used for stock storage. And in the summer, you'd get 8 or 10 visiting locos sat there waiting for their return workings. Yeah, okay, Tony. Right, inside the shed, this is the Somerset and Dorset shed. Construction. The walls are foam board, clad externally with a beachy board, just cut into strips and just stained down. Same with the pillars, all the timber work you can see there. It's all a beachy, is that the right way to call it.
I think so.
Yeah, very easy material to work in, work with, and the roof. You can see the beams in the roof. So it's an inverted W. So you've got it obviously covers 4 tracks, and I just built a former and made up however many of those beams that I needed. Stuck it all together, and the roof just lifts off. So the roof is in one piece and just lifts off for easy access. And was surprisingly quite straightforward to do. It's obviously not as long as the real thing. I can get 2 decent-sized tender locos, one behind the other. That's about half the length of the real thing, but again, usual modeller's compromise. Okay, next picture. So looking into the shed from outside, you can see everything. You can see the roof beams. Oh, the windows. Actually, I'd like to mention the windows. If you look to the right and look above the 7F, those windows are actually as the originals were. They were cast, and I've been pondering how to make these. And Gibson's obviously do a 4mm version, etched version. So I bought one, and then in enlarging it and printing it onto clear plastic sheet, I got the right scale 7mm windows. So I just reproduced as many as I needed, and then stuck them in. Yeah, it's amazing. You know, when you think about these things, it's amazing what you can do. Okay, next picture. Another one in the shed. So again, this is just looking from inside outside. All the timber framework is not a bad representation of the real thing. It's slightly simplified, but it certainly gives the right impression. And again, I think it's if one wanted to be 100% perfect in everything, then I don't think you'd ever finish anything. Certainly not for a railway of this size. So there's always sort of compromises along the way. Next picture. Again, looking over the sheds, station train shed in the background. Just gives you an idea. Oh, the BR260 Class 4 locomotives there on the front left is sitting on what was called the boat road, and that siding ran round behind the sheds on the left, and then curved round right behind the sheds and ran alongside the River Avon, and was used in the early days for transshipment of goods, hence the name Boat Road. Okay, Tony. Okay, looking in towards the station. It's a BR Class 4 coming out of platform 2, using the crossover to get onto the up line. It's slightly confusing because this is Midland metals, not Somerset and Dorset metals here. The left-hand track is the down line and the right-hand track is the up line. Of course, at the Bath Junction, Somerset and Dorset trains come off the Midland up line and onto the Somerset and Dorset down line. So I'm sure there's many places in the country where that kind of scenario happened. On the right, Midland Bridge Yard. And I'll start just to talk about the operation of the Somerset and Dorset. It was a really important through route between the Midlands and the North and the South. Going back to the old days when railways were paid by the mile on their tracks, inevitably the Midland and later the LMS wanted to keep goods on their tracks for as long as possible. So rather than moving stuff, wagon loads through Bristol onto the Great Western, they'd run them down the Somerset and Dorset to Temple Combe and then off on the southern down to the West Country, or continuing on down the Somerset and Dorset to Poole to reach the south coast. The Somerset and Dorset was really, really important and so busy because of that. The wagon loads would come in from the Midlands or the north to the very large yards at Westerly, just north of Bristol. They would be tripped from there, so anything for the south coast or North Somerset, they'd be tripped down to Bath S&D yard. From there, they'd then be made up into trains, primarily for Evercreech Junction. So they'd then be moved from the S&D yard at Bath down to Evercreech Junction. There, they'd be remarshalled again. Anything for North Somerset would go up the branch to Highbridge. Anything for the West Country would then be tripped down to Temple Combe in the yard there. There was 1 or 2 workings a day from Evercreech down to Poole for South Coast wagon loads. So really important. And there were 8 workings per day, trip workings from Westerly to Bath. That was matched by 8 workings from Bath down the Somerset and Dorset to Evercreech. And then you had the same number of trains working north. When you start adding in other workings, there was something like 50 trains a day going in and out of Bath just for freight. And I don't think people realise just how important it was at the time. Inevitably, though, it all began to unravel in the 60s. So the Somerset and Dorset, although everybody keeps saying it was killed by beaching, it wasn't. It was running out of work to do. It was always going to close, and it was a very expensive line to work. Okay, next picture.
Just before we move on to the next picture, I'm looking at your track work there. Is that all hand built?
No. For speed in the early days, I used Pico and Markway. And that was purely, and certainly if I were doing it again now, I'd be building all my own point work. I have a lot more experience now than I had in those days. So it was for speed of getting things up and running and reliability. Pico and Markway.
Thank you.
Okay. Again, the picture's got slightly squashed, but again, it gives you a good idea. S&D shed on the left, coaling stage in the middle, Midland shed, and then the station in the background. I'll just mention, because it came up on the forum the other day, the point rodding on the right is operational. When I first laid everything out, everything was going to be mechanically operated. In fairness, later on things did change, but that's brazing rod, and just soldered in. I think there was something like 2 meter lengths that I bought it in, and I've been down there for 18 years or more, and still works perfectly.
Super.
The signal gantry. And there's another one behind that you can't see. Are exact copies of what was there, and I'm just trying to remember the name of the chap who built it for me, and it just escapes me for the moment. I'll think of it in a minute. Anyway, very beautifully made, and as I say, an exact copy of what. If wherever possible, I've tried to match the original. Okay, next one. Looking the other way, so the up and down main lines are there on the left. The 4F is in Midland Bridge Goods Yard. This ladder of a double slip, 2 single slips was sort of the crux of operations at Bath Green Park. The black 5 that's coming in is on the down line, so it'll cross the single slip, and then it'll go over the crossover to gain platform 1. Sitting next to it is the loco that's going to take the train on down the Somerset and Dorset. So this is exactly the way Green Park was operated. And then on the right, you've got what I think is a 9F just coming up off Shed. Okay, next one. Okay, we've moved down again a little bit further. This is Bath Junction. The Somerset and Dorset Yard on the right. We have a lot of action going on here. I'll just sort of run through what's going on in the picture. So the 7F is coming in off the Somerset and Dorset. So northbound freights coming off the Somerset and Dorset went straight into Midland Bridge Yard, reception siding, well, reception shunting siding. He'll move along far enough for the guards van to be clear of, and you can see the Ginty in the background. That's standing in the shunter's siding. And so the guards van of the freight will actually clear the point to the Ginty. The 7F was released to go over that ladder of single slips and double slip straight to Shed. Ginty comes on the back and shunts the wagons out. In Midland Bridge Yard. Midland Bridge Yard tended to send freights obviously up to Westerly, which were going north, to Avon Docks and various Bristol concerns. I'll mention it now. One of the movements twice a day were empty coal wagons coming into Green Park and then going off to Midsummer Norton, to Norton Hill Colliery. And then the Falls would come back, doing exactly what that 7F has done, coming straight into Midland Bridge Yard. And then a Bristol Barrow Road 3F, 4F would then take them on to Bristol West Yard. And from there, a Great Western loco would take them up the Portishead branch to Portishead Power Station. And in the last years of the Somerset and Dorset, that was the norm. Most coal from Norton Hill going to Portishead Power Station. Right, so back to the picture. The Patriot is on the Midland Up line. That's on an express going north. The Ivet tank and 3 Monsell coaches is coming in from Bristol, Temple Meads, on a local to Bath. And then you have the Somerset and Dorset Yard here. It's 4F on the right. That's on Bath Duty 17, which was shunt the S&D Yard and bank freights up the Somerset and Dorset. And I'll mention that in a moment in more detail. The coal wagons that you can see in front of the 4F are for Bath Gasworks, which is just out of shot, but it's that siding on the right-hand side of the 4F. That was producing something like 3,000 tonnes of coal coming in a week in the winter period. So again, major movement of coal. Interestingly, it wasn't coal that came from the Radstock coalfields, it was coal that came from up north, from the Midlands. Something to do with the quality of the coal. Okay, next picture. Right, yeah, the opposite view of Bath Junction, looking back towards the junction, the S&D Yard. We've got an express coming out from Bath Green Park with the 4MT piloted by the 2P, and that's a Black 5 coming in on another express. And on a summer Saturday, this was what Bath was like. No sooner you got one underway coming out, the next one was coming in and had to be turned around. An amazingly busy place. And obviously everything on the Somerset and Dorset, because the Devonshire Bank, 1 in 50 of Devonshire Bank starts literally where the 2P is. So all the expresses had to be double-headed. All the freights coming out of the S&D yard had to be banked. Yeah, very interesting place. And it's from an operational perspective, really, really interesting. Okay, next one, please. Okay, Lincoln Vale. So Devonshire Bank goes up into Devonshire Tunnel, and we're literally stood above the southern portal of Devonshire Tunnel, looking up Lincoln Vale. So this is all rising at 1 in 50. And this is a northbound express coming up from Bournemouth to Bath and then on to wherever. Classic late summer Saturday afternoon combination, 4F and 2P. By the late afternoon, they were running out of locos, and anything would do. And bear in mind that the 4F has brought the express up from Bournemouth, and the 2P has only come on at Evercreech. Must have been a very slow journey. Okay, next one, please. Oh, actually, whilst we're talking about Lincoln Vale, the baseboard there is only 18 inches wide. If you can think back to the original pictures, although you can't see it, to the left are the 4 fiddle yard sidings at the lower level, and underneath here are 2 more sidings. So this 18 inches wide, but very photogenic from this sort of angle. So just talking about the train, you can see there's a 7F up at the front. That's up near Moggers Bridge, banked at the rear with the 4F, as you can see. And I don't know if you've seen the videos, you'll have seen freights being banked from the S&D yard up the bank. I'm not sure whether I've ever seen this actually taking place in model form. I'm sure others will know, but I can't think I've ever seen this happen. And in every operating session, this happens once or twice. It's great fun to do. And I used to, because the whole railway is analog, so it's not DCC. But I still used to be able to run, as long as I picked my locos carefully, I could still bank a freight up here under one controller. And now I do it in a slightly different way. So inevitably, the 7F that's radio controlled, battery operated, 53802 is at the front. And the 4F that you can see here, 44560, is also battery operated and radio controlled. So it makes control that little bit finer. But with both of them barking their heads off going up the bank, it's very realistic. And I find that very satisfying. Okay, next one. Okay, we're in the guards van. The camera that I use is a GoPro camera. So it's the size of a matchbox, and so fits on a wagon, and it gives you this sort of realistic view, if you like. So if you were the guard, this is exactly what you'd be seeing. As you enter Combe Down Tunnel, you'd be looking back at the 4F that's just dropped off the rear. That's Moggers Bridge in the background. And the 4F comes to a stand and then drops back down to Bath Junction. Worth a mention, actually, about the safety aspect of this. So the 7F had picked up its tablet from the Whittaker apparatus at Bath Junction. As the 4F goes past, the signalman gives him the Bath banking token. And until the 7F's token is given up at Midford and the banking engine token is put back in the machine at Bath Junction, nothing else can move on this section of single track. So just an interesting aside, helping modelers run even more realistic model railways. Okay, next one, please, Tony. Okay, from Combe Down Tunnel, we come out into Midford. The bridge in the background is Long Arch Bridge, which, no, Long Arch Tunnel. It was a bridge. There's a road there, but it was an extended bridge. Comes out into Midford Station. Midford Station was literally cut into the hillside and then launched out over Midford Viaduct. So this is actually quite realistic. You've got the drop away in front of to the right of the train and the station, and then the hillside going up to the left behind it. You can't really see the station building, but I had a kit that I'd made, and one day Mike Arlett said, shame it's not the real thing. And with that, one of my guys, Dave, produced a model of the real Midford Station. So I'm very, very proud of that. He also built the Hope and Anchor pub, which sits there in front, which still exists, as some of you may know. The signal box got an odd roof, single flat roof, like that because of a breakaway back in the late 20s. And some trucks that derailed here, part demolished the signal box, and it was rebuilt with a flat roof. Just above the Black 5 cab roof, you can see one of the unique Somerset and Dorset backing signals. So it's in the form of a cross. There was another one up by the bridge, the Long Arch Bridge. There's another one there. If a northbound train stalled getting up to Combe Down Tunnel, there was a telephone at the entrance to the tunnel. He could telephone the signalman here at Midford, who would pull off these backing signals, and the train would back down over the viaduct onto the upgrade on the other side, and then charge at it and have another go. So that's what those backing signals are for. Okay, next one, Tony. Looking the other way, that's the station building on the right that Dave built for me. The pub there you can see. The bridge on the left is the bridge over the old derelict Somerset Coal Canal, which ran parallel to the S&D at this stage, and then turned through 90 degrees to go underneath the second arch of Midford Viaduct and up the valley on the right. You can also see the ex-Great Western branch that came along later on. This is the branch where the Titfield Thunderbolt was filmed, and you've got you'll be familiar with it. You've got that opening sequence of a 1400 tank coming underneath the viaduct as a West Country storms past on the Somerset and Dorset. Well, that's the spot. Okay, next one. So we've moved on from Midford to Rislington, to the colliery. Two interesting movements here. On the right, 7F and 4F are on a pigeon special. Somerset and Dorset was famous for those. And they'd come from all over the country. And they'd let the birds out at Templecombe or even further down to Bournemouth, often using the stub of the Christchurch Ringwood line that had been closed for decades. And they'd often be parked up there and the birds released. And then the stock would go back north at the end of the day when most of the expresses had gone. On the left, 7F, which is actually on a van train. And again, it was one of those movements that happened several times a year. It's fertilizer from the Avonmouth chemical works, and you get a whole train go off down to Blandford and servicing the North Somerset farms for fertilizer, and here you see the empty train on its way back up north again. Right, next one.
What power supply do you use for double header?
Say again?
What power supply do you use for double heading?
I'm using Helmsman's controllers. I've got a 5 amp one and two 2.5 amp ones, and they're all most of the locos are on ABC gearboxes and Cannon motors, and no issue at all. Yeah. And what do we got here? So we've got Lynette 73087 and Pilot 76053. Lynette 73087 was a transfer every year from Nine Elms every summer. Was sent down from Nine Elms from 1956 right through to 1961. And in 1959, that's when she was named Lynette. Took one of the names from a withdrawn King Arthur. So you can see I'm trying to be as accurate as I can in my portrayal of the Somerset and Dorset. And I think that actually is the last picture.
Well, thank you very much. If anybody's got any questions, if you'd like to do so quickly, because we've already run over by about 10 minutes. So any questions, please go ahead.
Right, okay, yeah, just the smoke units. Yeah, no is the answer. I do it digitally. So I use Photoshop.
They look very nice.
Well, I think it adds something to it, I feel.
Yes. Yeah. At the end of the day, it's not the video, it's a photograph, so you can touch them up a little, can't you?
You certainly can, and I do.
And I know that one or two of them were squashed and cut a little bit in order to get them to fit into the page. I do apologise if they've gone rather out of shape.
That's all right. Well, I'd encourage you to, if you haven't watched the videos, do so. I do sort of 4 or 5 a year, and well, I think they're interesting. I'll leave you to decide.
I found the latest one that you did for this show, the last days of working. It was absolutely fascinating to watch as well.
Yeah, I'd been planning doing that for some time. With that 60th anniversary coming up early September, it was an absolute must to do. And yeah, and it was very enjoyable doing that. So for those that haven't seen it, it was a representation of the last day of Through Express working on the Somerset and Dorset, which was the 8th of September 1962. Mm-hmm. And really that was the start of the rundown to closure in 66.
Alex mentions your layout is a real work of art, and I second that. It really is.
Yeah, well, thank you very much.
Detail on it. Lovely.
Yeah, it's great fun, completely absorbing, as we all are with our models. And particularly when I was working, because I'm retired now, but when I was working, it was a great leveler just to get into a different world.
Well, Andrew, I'd like to say thank you very much for taking part in this show today. It's been very good of you to take time off from your other activities, and I really do appreciate it. Thank you very much, and thank you all for coming to have a look at the layout and to listen to Andrew's explanation of what it's all about, which has been very detailed and very interesting. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
It's great.
Not at all. Pleasure. Good to see you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to close the session now.